Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Shall we get started? I think you would rather see my face and hear my voice a bit better, right? All right. Good day, members of the Malaysian Dutch Business Council and guests and friends of the MDBC community. Hi, my name is Marco, and on behalf of the MDBC team and out of the MDBC office, I welcome you this afternoon from wherever you are logging in. More than ever, over the past nearly 3 months, our MDBC team has been working around the clock to bring you all relevant information on COVID-19 and MCO, to make sure that we can continue our engagement by bringing our community together. You have been following our often daily emails and announcements on webinars. We really appreciate to see you here with us online, and I'm very excited about today's webinar. Today is the last day of our conditional movement control order. Tomorrow we will move into the recovery MCO. So each day an increasing number of people will go back to their office, and therefore it's great to have this session of our MDBC Human Resources Forum 2020 on a safe restart today. To start the session, we would like to check with you from where are you working today, and also which percentage of your total workforce is now back in the office. We'll give you 30 seconds to answer these 2 questions on the poll that you see on your screen right now, please. And of course, Starbucks can mean any kind of coffee place where you like to hang out and bring your laptop, and where they have internet suitable for your operations. How are we doing? All right, we have about 60 people that have registered for today's session. We're very happy with that number. We hope you will be engaging with us, starting already with this poll. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you for your answers. We'll see the results in a moment on the screen. There they are already. Okay. 70% still from home. Wow, that's a lot. And nobody from Starbucks, ladies and gentlemen. You have to support the local economy. Get out there, spend some money, okay? 30% already from the office. I wonder if that's gonna change a lot tomorrow, or maybe starting on Monday. 36%, still 0% at your current workforce. And also 21% already nearly full capacity again in your office. Okay, at MDBC we're in the middle, about 50-60% right now, and we'll see. We'll probably keep it at that for the next couple of weeks by rotation. All right, we miss our live interaction, but we'll make the most out of the online engagement by getting our audience involved through this kind of polls. Thank you for your first participation, and of course through the question and answers later. Just a few house rules and announcement before we start. Your mics and video cam are switched off, if you have noticed, throughout the session to avoid any disruptions for our speakers. Questions can be asked via the Q&A box. We intend to invite you live in the session to ask your question. At the right time during the Q&A, you will receive a cue to unmute. And it would be great if you can jump into the session and ask your question live to the speakers. And we know that this question will come up. Yes, we are pleased to announce that all speakers will make their presentations available. So we will distribute and share those after the session. All right, with all current events, it's great to be able to pool resources and experience out of the MDBC membership community. And this certainly applies to today's session as well, with speakers from Randstad, Skrine, and Dutch Lady Milk Industries. Many companies face the question of how to navigate their business operations and adapt to the new normal, if there even is one. A safe restart was initiated by Randstad based on the global research Randstad has been undertaking on this subject. Ms. Jaya Dass, the Managing Director of Randstad Malaysia and Singapore, manages a team of more than 130 recruitment consultants across multiple specializations. Jaya is ready to share with you her insights on future-ready business strategies and empathic leadership skills. Jaya, over to you for your keynote, please. All the way from Singapore, ladies and gentlemen. Here's Jaya.
Thanks, Marco. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to meet you. First up, a big thank you to MDBC for organizing this and for giving us this opportunity to present. It's certainly our pleasure to be able to find an opportunity to contribute where possible, especially at a time like this. Just a quick introduction. My name is Jaya Dass, and I run both our Malaysia and Singapore practice operations. And I'm based in Singapore with my family, as Marco mentioned, and travel back to Malaysia weekly to see the team there, or at least I used to before COVID. Right now, of course, is work from home, and we are deploying our teams back into the offices very soon. We are, of course, a Dutch company founded in 1960, headquartered in Amsterdam. We reported almost 24 billion in revenue in 2019, and we employ over 38,000 employees globally and put to work 650,000 contractors daily currently. The HR services industry is uniquely positioned to help because of its exposure to various industries and sectors across both large MNCs and small enterprises. And we are privy to information by being ahead of the curve in accessing this information on challenges and struggles, as well as the solutions adopted and the observation on best practices. As intermediaries, we have been able to get a seat at the table to influence and support policymaking, as well as offer suggestions on representation of the private sector. As the global #1 staffing player, we're also well positioned to offer insights on employment practices that are being shaped across many countries as we navigate this unique situation. We formed an alliance with the Adecco and Manpower Group jointly, with research conducted by McKinsey in collaboration with Oxford University, to look at data as well as practices on returning back to work safely, and published a white paper alongside that. Our topic of presentation today is the quick summary and overview of return to work safely protocols, but also a coverage of what the challenges facing the organizations are and what to pay attention to on setting up the new normal. There have been many predictions on what the economic recovery line would look like from the pandemic. From projections of U-shaped to V-shaped curves, the estimation is about how quick and wide the economic recovery will be. According to the McKinsey research, the knock-on effects and policy response across the major economic markets in US, Europe, and Asia indicate that the most likely scenario to be a slow long-term growth with muted economic recovery and indications of virus recurrence. The weekend news reported on the London Financial Times that indicate that perhaps recovery could be quicker than expected, with the US showing strong signs of recovery despite the domestic turbulence, and Europe showing signs of recovery in stronger markets like Germany despite the automotive industry. However, much it may be the case, and we can possibly see a quicker shift. Preparing for a slow economic recovery with a cautious approach to safety and public health is the general take. Coming out of CMCO and Malaysia expecting to see a slow and steady recovery, organizations are learning to transition back to work safely. While some faced with executing cost-cutting measures and retrenchments, many are facing pressure to resume operations quickly to recover sales and staff productivity. Companies that managed well during lockdown by quickly implementing practice for work from home solutions to operate remotely were able to do two critical elements well: evaluating and measuring success and feedback, and as well as ensuring ongoing support from their staff and check-ins. If this was not part of their process flow, then more now than ever, it has become critical to success to ensure this for their staff due to the challenges ahead, and I'll cover this off in greater detail shortly in my slides. Here we are showcasing the elements of a template framework that is stemming from best practices, as well as the guidelines on what companies need to look at when planning their protocols. Preconditions such as public transportation, restrictions in state travel, childcare capabilities, and all conditions that will affect how companies approach staff returning to work, as well as having guidelines around safety protocols for staff and visitors. However, the weakest areas are the elements of training and onboarding, as well as being robust in how communication is being driven to staff in general, where not enough is often being done, and as well as there's a general lack in a strict adherence to compliance, and what the consequences on staff are if they do not see through to it. Our detailed protocols cover what needs to be done in all areas, from building, entrances, meeting and work areas, canteen, public areas, and sanitary spaces. Since we have a short time today, I'm going to keep a broad overview of the key things to note and not cover off any of these in detail. Instead, we will share these guidelines post-presentation as templates that you can compare against your own protocol frameworks. At any point, if you would like a conversation with us, feel free to reach out to me directly or through MDBC, and we're more than happy to spend some time. When tailoring your own protocols, evaluating risk levels and your own risk and mitigation plans is probably the most critical element. Another key thing to note is about making robust BCP planning around what happens to your staff in the event there's a reinfection or infection occurrence in the office after return to work, and what you will need to do to evaluate such risks and cope with such protocols such as a safety bay area to contain and isolated suspected cases until medical attention can be provided, as well as deploying BCP plans for the staff that are affected. Current BCP plans need to be updated based on staggered working conditions as they evolve and change with policymaking. With return to work, every organization is focused on getting its revenue up as quickly and as soon as possible to recoup on losses during lockdown, as well as to estimate its potential recovery. This relies heavily on staff productivity and how engaged they are with your recovery goals and efforts. MITI announced a 45% drop in productivity during MCO and CMCO, which is a massive spike to recover from for most organizations, indicating that the restrictions and or issues that they were having with implementing work from home effectively has caused their own economic decline internally. During MCO and lockdown worldwide, companies saw a reported increase in employee productivity levels as people showcased a liking for being able to work from the confines of their home and have the safety, as well as appreciate the flexibility. However, as companies return to the workplaces safely, the reality is that with safe distancing and staggered work conditions as crucial health measures, majority employees will continue to toggle with working from home and rotating in the offices among designated teams. Management is now facing new challenges on having to manage both workforces simultaneously and navigate the challenges of having to drive two separate workforces. If you have teams working in the office, the continuation of online team meetings, online engagements, and online collaboration is likely the new norm instead of having the traditional boardroom face-to-face meetings. During MCO, there were limitations on what most businesses could achieve due to restrictions. So a lot of staff during MCO had the luxury of not needing to be at full productivity during work from home. But with companies scrambling to recover losses and restore operations, the expectations of staff and their teams are now different during work from home in comparison to the lockdown. If there were challenges during MCO for companies to operate remotely, they need to be addressed immediately, as the new norm dictates that safety distancing will continue for some time until such time that vaccines are found. Every effort therefore needs to be made to ensure staff are supported sufficiently to continue working from home despite the staggered working environment in the offices. So how do you take the lead? Here it's important to look at what's needed in the new normal stage as you transition in the coming weeks physically to remote and staggered working. Staff are going to face a sense of disorientation and confusion on how to operate during this prolonged state, this two-pronged state and this prolonged state, and expectation from management on needing to up the ante for both recovery and growth plans. There's going to be a big need for increased collaboration and engagement from staff to be able to generate the necessary energy to drive operations forward and demonstrate that the recovery spirit to flush everyone out from the COVID coma, if you like. At this point, it's critical to understand now more than ever that it's not one size fits all. Individuals will be faced with very different challenges and circumstances depending on their personal situations at home, and will need a platform for feedback sharing and support at an individual level from their managers and the wider organization. In preparing for the new future of work facing us now, a couple of things need to be taken into consideration. There's also a likelihood that employees will face burnout from constant demand during work from home. Many already have webinar and screen time fatigue from constant virtual meetings. Understanding how these can promote engagement and drive participation is key, versus this being the reason employees tune out. Being home and working from home also narrows the boundaries between work and personal life, and employees reportedly end up working longer hours without a line in the sand on when work starts and stops. As employees expect more flexibility during work from home due to the challenges of managing that dual dynamic, organizations and its management must learn to increase the trust they have on their employees and learn to manage difficult situations remotely and transparently. Both will be cornerstones to ironing out the kinks in the workflow processes, as well as manage expectations between both parties for this to work well for the longer term. With an overwhelming request and expectation from employees that work from home is here to stay regardless of COVID, it's imperative that organizations find a way to offer this normality to its employees. Greater collaboration is required between HR and line management to meet employees' needs. There must also be a willingness to throw out all policies or restrictions that no longer serve the current needs and be bold about making these changes. It's important to communicate this why, what, and how to teams and be open to feedback from them on how to improve where needed. Staff expect a continued investment on digital tools during this period. In addition, they are also in desperate need of goal setting to ensure that there is a renewed vision and focus on growth at an organizational level that can propel their activities, but also their own individual growth and development through training, tailored individual plans for promotion and learning. Despite the change in circumstances, people still have the expectation of needing to move forward in their own personal goals. In closing, 3 things are critical to lead in the near future. Increase compassion towards staff, increasing and accelerating work feedback options, such as weekly employee surveys to get a pulse check on where teams are at. And lastly, over-communicating so staff have clarity on navigating in unfamiliar territory. I want to thank you for your time, and we're open to taking questions a little bit later.
All right, thank you so much, Selva is up next. Thank you very much, Jaya. All right. Of course, we will have you involved, Jaya, in the Q&A later, and for a quick launch on these publications, which will also be made available to all attendees today and to the wider MDBC membership community. Next up is Ms. Selva Malar Alagaratnam, a partner at Skrine and co-head of the firm's employment practice, providing integrated support to a wide range of clients in various industries on all employment, human resource related matters, including compliance with all laws applicable to employment relationships. We found out that according to Chambers Asia, Selva is one of the best employment lawyers and is very knowledgeable. So we're very honored, Selva, to have you here join us today in what is already your 12th webinar over these past few months. So over to you, and please share your insights with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. It is indeed a pleasure to join this great panel today. A big thank you to MDBC for inviting me to be a part of this webinar. So yes, I really enjoyed listening to Jaya's presentation. It was very enlightening. We are just moving into the recovery conditional movement, the Recovery Movement Control Order, or RMCO as it is quickly becoming known. And during this RMCO, almost all business activities can resume. The standard operating procedures that were rolled out when the Conditional Movement Control Order was introduced are still in place and must be adhered to. We are all still acclimatizing to the new norm and what looks to be, here to stay for some time. And as the lawyer on the panel, I will focus mostly on the concerns that businesses have about liability that may attach to the employer, either due to non-compliance with the SOPs or in relation to managing employee rights and obligations when making changes to the workplace, as well as working methods. This, of course, includes the options available to minimize risk. Most businesses have accepted that the SOPs are here to stay, at least until the end of the year, if not longer. So let's take a quick look at, so if you have issues or if you don't know yet what your SOPs are, you can find them on the website of the National Security Council. The English translation is also available on the Skrine website, so please feel free to access that web link as well, so that you have an idea of what the SOPs are. And I am aware that there are many businesses, or at least there are some businesses that have difficulty even identifying which SOPs apply to their industry. If you are one of those, then please reach out either to your in-house counsel or your external counsel who will be able to help. Now, having
Selva, sorry to interrupt. Can you please press full screen for your presentation?
Oh, sorry.
Your PowerPoint will be on full screen. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay, so having said that, we find that, you know, whether it is CMCO or RMCO or anything, the business concerns are really the same. For us as employment lawyers, we find that clients' concerns circulate around productivity, financial results, and risk management. And when we look at the current situation, the main concern is a safe working environment. There is, and of course we have the SOPs as I have mentioned, but what needs to be kept in mind that it doesn't start and end with the SOPs. There has always been an overriding obligation on every employer as set out in the Occupational Safety and Health Act that the employer has an obligation to provide a safe and conducive working environment. So this must be kept in mind, right? It's not enough to just comply with the SOPs. Please consider what your obligations are to ensure that your work environment is really safe and conducive. There is, of course, the question of employee management. It is not easy to manage employees as it was before, because employees are not all centralized in your workplace. People are working from home, and some businesses have found it necessary to create satellite offices so that they are all spread out and not in the same location. There has been a need to develop and implement work from home arrangements. And then there is the revision of human resource documents needed to enable the new norm. We can't always rely just on the old policies and processes that we had. And most importantly, of course, we have to ensure that while we're doing all this, to keep our business efficient in this time, which is, you know, very challenging, we must still comply with the laws that are applicable, not just the regulations introduced in relation to the pandemic, but also all other applicable employment laws. Now, talking about HR policies, as I mentioned earlier, there is the general obligation under OSHA. There is a need to relook at all the HR policies, because some of the policies that have been in place for, you know, for some time may not be so relevant anymore, or may not serve the purpose that the current norm presents. So this is the time to look at your HR policies and decide if you need to review them, revise them, make any changes. In fact, you might want to revamp them completely. You need to ask yourself whether it's adequate to deal with the current pandemic and also future events that, you know, that are unanticipated. And be sure that, you know, when you do revise them, you don't make them so COVID-centric. You want to make them flexible so that it can deal with any situation that presents itself. One thing I can tell you from experience that many clients are doing is they are rewriting their employment contracts. Everybody is trying to include a clause that says that if for any reason the business cannot operate for more than 5 days or 7 days, people will have to go on no pay leave, you know, and things like that. So these are things that you need to sort of caucus and decide what's going to serve your purpose. And most importantly, of course, training, yeah, in any aspect, especially these days. And as Jaya also said earlier, the biggest gap seems to be in communication training. This must be addressed properly and quickly. And before I get into other aspects of it, let me also explain to you what the repercussions repercussions are in case there is non-compliance with applicable laws. So first, insofar as the regulations concerning MCO or RMCO, etc. are concerned, there is a risk of being shut down if there is non-compliance with the SOPs. There is even the risk of your license being revoked. So these are very serious repercussions, and you want to be careful not to find yourself in that situation. All the relevant laws provide for fines and other statutory penalties, including under OSHA. And practically speaking, of course, there is that risk of reputational harm, right? None of us want to make news as, you know, that employer, that business premise that became the new hotbed of a cluster. And we all know how clusters are named now, right? We have the Italian cluster, we have the Pasar Osman cluster, and this and that. So we don't want to be, you know, whatever a company is called, we don't want to be that XYZ cluster and make it in the news for the next few weeks. And, you know, reputational harm, as we all know, can be the worst sometimes. There can be also a very bad effect on employee morale if employees become unhappy or uncomfortable about coming to work. If they perceive the workplace to be less than safe, then they're not going to be happy coming into work. And we all know what that means. Productivity drops. And in the current day and age, just as much as human capital is one of the most precious assets of a company, you know, similarly or thereby employee morale becomes a value which is really precious, just as precious. Then there is the question of civil liabilities, right? If somebody is impacted or affected due to some failing on the part of the company, they can always commence a civil action to claim for damages. And this is not limited just to your employees. It can be just anybody who comes into your premises as a visitor. So what are the health and safety initiatives that most employers are doing at the current time, which is of course very popular, is the question that they're all asking themselves whether they should impose mandatory testing. You can if you want to. The law allows for it because you can do it in the name of ensuring safety and health in the workplace. Whether you want to do it is a different question, because really, if you ask me as a lawyer whether you should do it, I will ask you, right? I will counter that question with, how often are you going to do it? I mean, is it enough for you to do it on 10th June? And then how do you know that the employee is not going to get infected or exposed the coming weekend or the weekend after that? You have to also consider the cost effect of it. So really, unless there is a real need to do mandatory testing, to impose it on your employees, you may not want to do it. Then the question that often clients ask is, can we impose a quarantine on our employees if we feel that they have been exposed to the virus? Yes, you can. The Ministry of Human Resources as well made this very clear, in fact, even before the MCO was imposed. If you think there is a need, you can impose quarantine on your employees, but you cannot do it on a no-pay basis, yeah? So bear that in mind. But that is no excuse not to impose the quarantine. And I do know of many businesses who, what they are doing as a matter of precaution is they are telling their employees the minute you have the slightest symptoms, you know, not just a fever, if you have the sniffles, etc., a bad throat, don't come into work. And if it happens, and unfortunately it's happening a lot because employees are scared of losing their job. So even when they have mild symptoms, they are coming into work because they're fearful that they may be seen as employees who are abusing this, as malingerous. And then when the HR or head of department, whoever finds somebody who who is having the symptoms in the workplace, not only are they sending that person home, they are also putting that whole department, everybody who has been in contact with this person, on quarantine for the requisite number of days, which is generally 2 weeks. There is also an initiative to collect more data than before, health declaration forms, travel declaration, especially now that cross-border or rather interstate travel is being allowed, so that you have an idea of what the exposure level of your employees are, bearing in mind that this data collection also applies to your visitors, people who come to your premises. You need to ask them these questions. And the most important reason, of course, for data collection is for contact tracing. So you need to collect the right amount of information, the names of the people, their contact details, where they have been, who they have been in contact with, and also maintain a record as to how long these people were on your site. Now, when we talk about data collection, we have to bear in mind that we have the Personal Data Protection Act of 2020. And under this act, we have the regulations and we also have the standards that have been issued. Now, the most important thing, the most important obligation as a business premise owner is to, one, have the notice and consent forms on display for your visitors. Insofar as your employees are concerned, I hope that most people already have the standard employee notice and consent forms, which the employees have signed off on. If you haven't, I suggest you do it very quickly. Now, you must also bear in mind that when you ask for health information, and remember, it is health information because you're recording the temperature of everyone on a daily basis, you need explicit consent. Now, no doubt at this current time, you can rely on the SOP and say, no, I'm collecting this medical information for compliance with applicable laws, but we do not know how long the SOPs will be in place. If you want to continue to maintain or collect data of this nature, it is best to have the necessary forms in place to obtain explicit or express consent. The other thing to bear in mind when you do collect all this data is security of this data. Now, this is a principle which is in the PDPA itself, in the Act itself, and we all know that data is a minefield, right? It's a treasure trove for certain commercial businesses. Now, especially if you are collecting medical information, then it is data that the pharmaceutical industry may want. If you're collecting data as to where people have traveled within the country, it may be data that the travel industry may want, and you have to ensure that this data is kept safe. The last thing you want is also for any individual or group of individuals to say that their personal data was leaked or sold to third parties. Now, work from home is a big part of the new norm. In fact, it may be the biggest part. And with it comes a whole range of challenges. The biggest challenge, I would think, for in the employment sphere is performance management. The performance management tools that were used before may not be relevant anymore. The punch card system, you know, what time people come into work, go out, what kind of lunch break they take, how late they stay at work, these are all going to be irrelevant. Businesses have to come up with a new way of assessing efficiency, setting goals, how to measure if somebody is improving in the workplace, and things like that. So that is a big area for human resource to work on. The other challenge is when it comes to mentoring. So this picture of this person with a watering can and a plant growing out is really about training and mentoring. Previously, it was all face-to-face. You know, for training, everybody was in a room. You had a trainer in front with a board there. And if you ask me, yes, training done online, I think would still be efficient, just like how we can have a webinar like this online. But I myself am not so sure about mentoring. There is a certain personal element when it comes to mentoring. And I think this is a big challenge when people are going to have to do it remotely. So HR would need to think of ways on how to facilitate mentoring and training in this new era. You would have to think about all sorts of new policies for work from home, online meeting policies. You don't want somebody looking like this in this picture here, you know, taking a meeting with their feet propped up, in their pajamas, talking to your important clients, looking like that. You may also have to come up with very strict policies about work-life balance, or in fact work-life separation, right? So what has happened with work from home is it has really blurred the lines between work and home, and you find that many people are doing this, right? They're working full days or longer than full days while looking after their children, cooking the meals, and there is just no end to it. I myself found in the first 3 weeks of the MCO that I was working almost 18-hour days, because you just forget, right? You're at home, the laptop is there, and you're just constantly gravitating towards it, and you almost feel an obligation to respond to every email no matter what the time is. So this is where HR would have to take a lead and tell employees, even though you're working from home, please log off at 6 p.m. or whatever, so that people don't suffer a burnout. It's inevitable that it would happen if there is no separation between work and non-work. Another big legal risk is
Salva, sorry to interrupt. Can you please round up your presentation? Thank you.
Yeah, so another big risk, as I was saying, is protecting confidential or sensitive information. Previously, when we all worked in the office, whatever policies that were in place to manage confidentiality may not apply anymore. It's just not doable, because now people are working at home. They may be sharing devices. They're working in an environment where somebody who's not part of the organization can just look over their shoulder and see what they're doing. You can be on a call, what should be a confidential call, but people are listening, family members are listening in on the call. The last thing you want, imagine if it was me talking to a client on the phone, to have my child listen to this conversation and tomorrow say, hey, guess what? This company is going to retrench 200 employees. Okay, so these are things that you have to manage, come up with new confidentiality policies so that your employees know how to do this without affecting it. And my final point is to seize the day. A lot of times, I mean, those of you who are in HR will be aware that it is very difficult to make changes to contractual terms in Malaysia because it can be viewed as breach of contract. And I would say to you that this is the best time to do it, because employees are more amenable now to a change. They know that we are in a crisis situation, that this is the time for everybody to play ball. And if you are going to make any changes to your contractual terms, your policies, your processes, this is the time. Grab the opportunity. Thank you. Marco, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Salva. And I believe if I listened carefully that some of the situations that you just covered already had something that somewhere behind your background screen, also something that you have to deal with yourself at home, right?
Yes.
Making it all a lot more personal suddenly. So indeed.
Yes.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, at this moment you will also get on your screen in the chat a link to a survey, COVID-19 survey for HR personnel, which Skrine is undertaking at the moment. So after this webinar, please firstly copy this survey link, and after this webinar, please spend a few minutes on answering the questions so Skrine can get some more input. We will also provide the link again in the post read after this event. All right, and then another kind reminder to everybody to post your questions in the Q&A box. Not in the chat box, please, but in the Q&A box. It's a little bit easier for us and for the panelists to manage your questions that way. Thank you. All right, next up is Ms. Sharon Fu, the Human Resource Director for Dutch Lady Milk Industries, a subsidiary of Royal Friesland Campina, a global company headquartered in the Netherlands. With a workforce of more than 900, Dutch Lady is one of the largest Dutch MNCs in Malaysia, and of course with its line of products is considered essential, and therefore the production had to remain operational right from the start of the MCO. Sharon's role covers the main public listed organization and its factory. She is accountable for running HR services for the organization, including the global shared services. Sharon will now passionately share her experiences from the past few months. Right, Sharon? Over to you, please.
Thank you, Marco. And, hi, everybody. Good afternoon. A delight to be here. I echo what Selva said. I think I really enjoyed Jaya's sharing and her insights. And Selva had amazingly so much important points for us to remember in HR as we, journey through the COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 period, right? So, so my name is Sharon, as Marco introduced. I support the Dutch Lady organization. We are made up of blue and white workers, white collar workers, and we are unionized. So it is a plethora of different contract terms that we are managing in the company. And this whole period of the pandemic was very interesting for us and for me, right, as we journey. So when MDBC came to ask me to join this panel, I was kind of wondering, how do I share, right? And I thought the best way is to actually share a springboard from my organization, People and Culture within Dutch Lady. And among the vision statements that we have in the company, especially during this pandemic, we felt that, we needed to give the right experiences to our employees, and we need to anchor it with action and connection within the organization. Yeah. So this is a chart which you are familiar with, right? This is the stages of the periods in which we went through for over 2.5 months, and we're slowly coming out of it in the RMCO period, starting tomorrow. Right, so for Dutch Lady Malaysia, we started our journey even before that, on the 12th of March when WHO announced it as a pandemic, and that's when we stopped and we thought, okay, we really need to look at this quite seriously because it's quite unknown at that point of time, right? And then if you go through the different stages of MCO announced on the 18th and right through, we actually had a different series and approaches of dealing with our staff. We went in from full workforce. We then went into a work from home for the office staff fully. We had full plant operational because we were part of the essential services and we needed to provide the products and the milk to the nation. We then went into we moved from partial sales mobilized to fully sales mobilized. And then we did also open the office shortly, right? There was a bit of a false start in the middle of the MCO period. Management then decided that we will do progressive workforce in the workplace, and tomorrow we're going to fully open 100%, right, within Dutch Lady itself. So it's been quite a journey, and when we started pre-COVID, we had all of this initiatives thought through, and that time everybody was in the office. We said we're going to do a drill. We were so excited about the drill and said, okay, we're going to start work from home, and that was on the 16th of March. And very quickly on the 18th of March, COVID, the MCO came in, right? And we were told that we needed to start working from home fully. And this is an organization which had a bit of an informal, flexible working arrangement. We had nothing formal, but we were all quite open to it. And the amazing thing happens. I think we are such resilient human beings, right? The minute you have something like this, we very quickly went into work from home. We organized ourselves very quickly, right? And we knew that we needed to change the way we work in the organization very quickly, right? And to do that, we needed a lot of, sort of guiding posts and business guidance. And the company took a decision saying that when we move into this period, we need to take into account employee safety. We need to take into account nourishing as a focus, right? We need to look at long-term views and at the same time abide by government guidelines and regulations as well. So the choices we made were anchored on these few principles in the company, and we kept that throughout the whole period of the MCO. Yeah. Now, within HR itself, we knew that people were going through a lot of changes. And so we were at the point where, as Selva mentioned, there were a lot of call outs for, we knew that the economic situation was coming, right? And we were bracing ourselves for it. We were a bit worried. Many companies were talking about things like pay cut, unpaid leave, annual leave, things like that, that was very uncertain for organizations. And I think as a business, we went back and said that we need to be stronger together, right? And with that, we will continue to pay payroll for everybody. However, to meet payroll every month, we need to actually leverage on the collective combined ideas of everybody and really forge through this period together. And HR's role at that point of time was really to continuously engage, energize, and support our population as we went through the change. I'm sure many of us on the phone today also had the same sort of energy that we needed to push through this period in time as we adapt to the change. So COVID-19 has definitely disrupted a lot of what we were doing in the past. So as Selva mentioned, a lot of things changed for HR, right? We needed to do things very differently. No longer we had the punch in, punch out. We had things like stand-up meetings, right? Things that you come on in the morning and you basically do a bit of a round table just to keep each other connected to what we are all doing, because we're all isolated in our respective homes or in our respective areas, right? So stand-up meetings was a big one. It changed quite a bit. We didn't used to do it every day, but now with the work from home, we used to do it every day. And this just not, it was not only for one team, it was multiple teams. Everybody started doing this. And this connect helped us remain relevant to each other, right? We knew what we were doing and we could progress the work and be equally productive. We continued to hire, and the hiring approach was very different. We did a lot of video calls, right? We didn't stop. We then continued to pay payroll. So the payroll team didn't need the volume of paper that they will generate in the office. In fact, we went into a digital platform, and that was amazing for us. All the signing was done online. And all along, we had that technology. We didn't realize we have it. And this period forced us all to adopt quite quickly. Yeah, learning went into virtual learning very quickly. We had employee engagement, events that will help our employees mentally, spiritually, and physically. So we had things like, online Zumba, online yoga. It was quite interesting to be watching somebody on the screen and trying to follow that. Of course, industrial relations was tough. As Selva mentioned, it was quite tough to deal with it while you're working from home. But collectively, we had moved through and continued our cases, handling of our cases on site, right? We launched a few things during this period, and we also made sure that people were safe, right? As they need to get on the streets, like our sales workforce, they needed the paperwork and the authorization to get on the road, right? So all of this actually helped, put to rest a lot of anxiousness in our employees, as we remain connected, comforting them, as well as communicating quite a bit. Yeah. So now as we start to move back to the office, return to work in Dutch Lady itself, right? Yes, I think there is a poll coming up, Marco.
Yes, it's right here on the screen already, Sharon.
Yeah. So would you like to go back?
What was the one most critical action, activity, or tool that supported you in being productive during the various periods of movement control order?
Yes. So if you could respond to that poll, and do you want to do the countdown or give them some time?
Yeah, we're looking at the number of responses here. Let me fill it in myself as well. Okay. All right. Yeah, it takes some time to read, I think. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, ladies and gentlemen.
Awesome.
All right, and let's give the results to Sharon. There they are.
Very good. So I think connectivity with teammates, managers, supervisors, coaches, or mentors have been the one biggest thing that helped a lot of us. And I think it's quite true, because that individual connect is quite important, and the ability to do that even while you're isolated is critical, right, in keeping you abreast with work. Thank you for that. Thanks, Marco, for the reminder. And sorry I jumped so quickly. Yeah, I was conscious of time.
please continue, Sharon. Indeed, time.
Thank you. Yeah, so returning to work itself, at Dutch Lady, I think as with most of the other companies, many companies will have a framework in terms of how they go back to work. And, Jaya had an amazing plethora of advice of how to do it. And I think it's very important to also adopt some of it, if not most of it, right? Social distancing, a big item for us. In the office, things have changed and the look and feel has changed. The allowance to use certain location has changed. Site zoning is also important. We also do a lot of health checks and measurement as people come back to the office. Contact tracing is a big thing for us. Now we are moving into a QR code model to cut down the paperwork and to cut down the manual approach. So all of this new technology is starting to come into the office as well. Now for future, in terms of safety, we want to look at the whole vaccine readiness to see whether, to continue to keep our employees, safe from COVID-19, and also, to make sure that they're assured. We are also looking at rethinking the role of the office, given that, a lot of times now people are able to work from home, and we've seen it be very successful within many organizations. The second piece is around well-being. So to Selva's point and Jaya's point, I think people are also going through some level of fatigue as they adapt quickly to this change, right? And that fatigue needs a bit of comfort, right? The mental resilience that people have needs a lot of boosting. And that means creating awareness, communicating what they can do so that they can self-manage even better. Cultural change of the new way of working, that whole marginal gains in doing something slowly, progressively, and learning from each other. A big thing around performance management, mid-year conversations are coming up. So this is actually very timely for us, right? How do we focus on our goals now that we're mid-year, and how do we stay the course? Of course, connecting through, providing learning and development is also very important. The third piece is really around future adoption. So Selva talked about, the whole piece on changing our policies. Absolutely. We need to look at some of our policies to see whether they are relevant or not, and to introduce new policies, right? So among of the things that we did, in returning to work at Dutch Lady was to do the COVID testing. This was more around assuring employees and to also give them data as to their own personal health, right? We are very well aware of the tests and what it means. It means that, we potentially have to do it again and again. At this point of time, doing the test before returning to office has provided us with much comfort. We are happy to say that at this moment for the office, we have discovered no positive cases, which is actually quite comforting for everybody, right, as we return to work. Yeah. The second thing was, if you look at your day in the office, we have basically done so much social distancing and setting up the office. And there's a team today working on it, the return to work team. So the minute the individual actually reaches the office, we know that they will go through a lot of changes, starting even from the car park, right, to the elevator, pantry. If you enter the office, you have to do your test. At the end of the day, contact tracing, meeting rooms, your lunch will be packed, prayer rooms, and of course, when you have deliveries, what you do with it. So the whole going back to office, the way you operate in the office is going to change quite tremendously. And then of course, your whole hygiene, 3W, 3Cs at all time is very important, right? Now, in terms of policies, we have also looked at different policies. We don't have this cast in stone right now. And this is really a time for us to put it forward to people, to look at them and say, okay, do you want to go into staggered working hours? There is options for work from home or compressed work week. So all these different variations is something that we are going to introduce to the company to see whether there is an ability to help our employees as well when they navigate through this change. right? And of course, along with the policy change, there will be a lot of benefits that we will look at repurposing, because some benefits may not be relevant today, may be relevant to, we need to repurpose it to what is relevant to the employees. Yeah, so in short, that is my little sharing, Marco and team, with what Dutch Lady is doing. I think we're stronger together. So back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. And definitely all of us were much stronger during this period because we kept drinking Dutch Lady milk. So thank you for keeping your operations open during the MCO and supplying your milk all over the country. I know that it wasn't always easy to distribute throughout the country, but you managed, and I don't think there were many empty shelves during this time period. So compliments to you. And,
thank you.
Yeah. Sharon's closing question to the audience is your company looking at transforming existing employee benefits to cater to a new normal? And it's just a yes or no, ladies and gentlemen. So I think I can already start the countdown right now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're closing the poll and we'll bring up the results. An overwhelming 81% says yes. All right, and I think that is something that we can take into the panel as well. So yeah, thank you very much, Sharon. And yeah, requesting Selva and Jaya to come back on screen as well, please. Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard on the research, on the best practices, the practical experiences, and of course the employer's obligations. So you got a safe restart across the board during this past hour. If you tuned in a bit later, we are pleased to announce that all speakers will make their presentations available. So time to get into the questions of the audience. And before that, yeah, actually one of the slides just now, your day when you return to work. I think that that is a very practical slide for a lot of people here in the audience. Sharon, anybody can adapt that to their own company and their own environment, of course. All right, we have a number of questions already. Thank you for that. So should you still want to submit a question, please do so now. As mentioned, we intend to invite you live into the session to ask your question at the right time during the Q&A. So please be ready when you get the cue to unmute so you can engage directly with the audience. We can try this. We hope it works out that way and that indeed we will be able to get you into the audience. All right, I think Adeline is already working on that on the sidelines to get people in the audience unmuted. Let's see if that works. All right, the first two that we would like to unmute are Malia and Hans. Let's see if we can get them live with us. Hans, can you unmute yourself, please? And
yeah,
Malia as well. Yeah, I'm taking both of you together because it will be a little bit of a, not exactly the same question, but I think we can answer them together. All right, Malia, can you unmute yourself, please?
Hi. Hello.
Thank you, Malia. All right, I think you were the first one to ask a question today, Malia. So can you please introduce yourself and ask your question to the panel, and please indicate who you ask your question to.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Malia. I'm from Fugro, Malaysia. I would like to ask, during this work from home, do we apply for sick leave and annual leave for staff?
All right, thank you very much. And at the same time, we would like Hans to ask his question because I think we can kind of combine a bit of the answers of the panel. Hans, go ahead.
Okay, I just say, will employees have to advise the company when they're traveling for business, or where they have been, including meetings, maybe if they're overnight with third parties? And secondly, do they have to advise of non-business trips they're making, maybe during the week or so, during the weekends or so?
All right, it all applies a bit to what staff are supposed to do or can do. All right, Selva, can we start with you, please, on these questions?
Okay, so the answer to Malia's question is very simple. Yes, Malia, even when they are working from home, annual leave and sick leave will apply. So if an employee says they're on sick leave and they submit the medical certificate to you, then you certainly don't expect them to be working even from home. And similarly, they can take annual leave. Yeah, they can just say, I need 2 days off because, well, they just don't want to look at their computer that 2 days, or, you know, for whatever reason. So yes, they apply. And Hans, your question is, I think, more a question of whether an employer can impose these requirements on the employees, that if you go anywhere on business, that you actually have to provide a log of where you went, which restaurant you had your business lunch with, who you met with, how you traveled, you know, did you take public transport, your own car, Grab car, etc. And also, I suppose you're asking if what they do in their personal time, if in the weekends. Now, the law basically doesn't prohibit you from asking these questions. And I would advise you that you strike a balance. Your employees have to understand that you are asking them to report these details, not because you want to know what's going on in their private lives, and you know, it's not for gossip value, but because you want to manage risk. So you can actually say to your employees that, okay, interstate travel is now allowed, and we can still advise you, we advise you to please anyway minimize travel, limit it to essential travel. And if you have to travel, please let us know, because then we will manage risk. So for example, if an employee comes back on a Monday morning and submits a form to you saying that I went, out of state to a particular town, a particular state, and later, within 2 or 3 days, if it is in the news or you become aware that that area has become a red zone, you may want to take steps. You may want to then quarantine this employee, right? So it is basically just to manage risk, but you need to communicate this very carefully to your employees. Employees shouldn't be made to feel like they no longer have privacy, or they no longer have the right to say no when you ask what could seem to be intrusive questions. So explain to them why and then do it.
All right, thank you, Selva. Sharon, of course, a large part of your team is on the road as well. How do you do that with your team? Do they have to report in?
Yeah, so from the office perspective, right, the office itself, we have a contact tracing form for which we are asking employees to note down who they get in touch with, for more than 15 minutes was our guideline. For those on the road, we don't really, require them to keep track of every individual that they meet. But they are obviously conscious that every day they need to actually log in some amount of, noticing where they go throughout the day. But we don't have it mandatorily requested for the sales workforce, only those in the office, because the sales workforce are quite in the open, right? So, when they meet customers, they meet, almost anybody in the street, it seems quite difficult and not practical for them to be collecting that data at this point of time. But it is something that, we probably will need to look at, in enforcing within the company itself.
All right, thank you. Quite a few questions came in the last few minutes, and of course we're already past 4:30. I would really like to stay on for a few more minutes, both with the panel, of course, as well as with the audience, to get a few more questions answered. Thank you for your participation, and please allow us a bit more time this afternoon together with you. The next one that I would like to invite into the session is Fadi. Fadi, you have a question on recording online.
Hi, my name is Fadi Yunus. I'm from HQ Pack. I noticed with a lot of our employees are new to working remotely. So with the introduction of online platforms, almost everyone is hitting the record button. And then of course, there is no announcement. Well, I'm not sure about what the laws here in Malaysia are, but in a lot of countries, in our HQ, in the Netherlands, for example, you have to explicitly tell people you are recording. So how does it work here? And what are the implications of employees doing that quietly? Is consent required? Should there be an announcement made to all of the attendees, or how does it work?
I think this one would be mainly on your side, Salva.
Yes.
Okay, so Fadi, actually in Malaysia, there are no explicit laws against recording of conversations. And in fact, our Evidence Act actually says that even if you illegally obtain evidence, you can produce it in court. However, as a matter of good practice, and this is when HR policies come in, because then you can manage it by having rules and regulations to say that there should be no recording unless all participants have been told that there will be recording. In that way, if an employee does record without anyone's knowledge, the employee is in breach of an internal rule or policy, and you can take disciplinary action.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for that. All right, we would like to invite Mary to come into the session.
Hi,
Hi, Mary.
I'm from Sun Media, and I would like to know is after the 10th of June in Malaysia, will the staff from overseas be quarantined 14 days in a hotel? Because we understand that they'll be randomly put in a hotel. Or now after the 10th, can they self-quarantine instead of going to any hotel?
All right, I'm going to take this question with the okay of the panel, ladies. I'm not the HR practitioner, but this is something that as a chamber we've been dealing with a lot over the past few months, of course. At this moment, as of now, according to the official rules, staff from overseas to come back into Malaysia, if they are already allowed into the country, of course that's a first. If they're Malaysians and they come from overseas, it will now start to be a quarantine from home, starting today, tomorrow.
What happens if they are from overseas?
If they're foreign staff, indeed, part 2 of this, they are not yet allowed into the country unless they have a permanent residency. It's a bit fake at this moment. This ruling could apply all the way until the 31st of August, which is really scary to a lot of companies because it involves people with employment passes, dependents, Malaysia, my second home, etc. But just during the session, I've been informed that a few of my colleagues, especially also with the EU Chamber of Commerce, they had a meeting today with MITI, with Immigration, with the National Securities Council. And there seems to be, finally progress on this area. So more news can be expected today, tomorrow, which can be a lot more favorable for the foreigners to finally come back to Malaysia. And this is especially important for the investors. Sometimes the CEOs cannot even come back to the company right now because they have a work permit and not a permanent residency. And hopefully in the next few days, we get better news. If it's going to be quarantine in a hotel for 14 days and or home quarantine, we don't have the details yet. But anyway, there's finally some progress on this important issue for foreigners. All right, Mary?
Right, thank you.
All right, thank you so much for allowing me this question. It's been an issue that the chambers have been working on a lot behind the scenes, dealing with immigration, dealing with MITI, dealing with immigration, and it has even gone up to the Prime Minister's office as well. All right, Koen, can we invite you in this session as well? Koen will be our moderator for the next HR session on Thursday, but I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Koen, your question about the platform for employees to complain. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hi Marco, thanks a lot. Thanks all three of you for the presentation, very interesting. I had a few questions, if you allow me, Marco, but very short questions, I think. First question
but maybe the answers can be very long, Koen.
I don't think so. I don't think so. So, a question for you. I'm wondering, is there a platform for employees to either complain or raise concerns about their employer? Because I can imagine there are some employers that don't have that culture where you can really raise up your voice, go to HR, go to your line manager and be heard.
Oh yes, externally there are, because an employee who feels that the terms haven't been complied with, they, for example, if they come within the scope of the Employment Act, they can actually go and make a complaint with the nearest labor office. For all other employees, within 6 years, they can commence a civil action in the civil courts. And this is actually the most dangerous, in the sense that you may have an employee who appears to keep quiet now, but you can know that in the next 6 years, and it might be after they leave you to get another employment somewhere else, that they can file a civil action to say that there were certain actions taken by the employer that affected their rights. And of course, employees who feel that their contract has been breached can even allege constructive dismissal immediately and go to the file an action of unjust dismissal, which will go to the industrial court.
Yeah, okay, thanks, very clear. And just a short question for Sharon, if you allow me. I was just curious for Dutch Lady. First of all, Sharon, did you see any impact on productivity and motivation among staff, first of all? And second of all, I'm wondering, after COVID, will Dutch Lady still continue practices of working from home, or are we going to go back to normal?
Yeah.
All right, Koen. Sharon has already give you a written reply on that, so I'll just give her 30 seconds to answer whatever is left.
Yes,
yes.
yes. So Koen, thanks for the question. I think you asked about whether we saw any reduction of productivity. And I'll give you an interesting insight. We saw productivity go up, and even for those who were truant, we had huge productivity, because I'll give you an example. We've got cases where, individuals, may come in late to work, but because they don't commute anymore, they're so much more on the job from home, right? And that was a big, really nice surprise for us, right? Within the company. Now, as time goes by, as we progress, as I said, we got a bit of that fatigue sinking in, because people were working, to Selva's point also, working really long hours. So we needed to intervene and to see what we can do with individuals who are working too long hours, right? Then. But now we're going back to the office. It's also, something new that we need to deal with, and the journey continues, learning.
I can imagine, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, thank you so much, Sharon. Does anybody have a question for Jaya? She's sitting there all by herself right now in Singapore. It's like...
Yeah, very happily listening, Marco. All good.
All right, very good. Okay, we're getting to the last question, unfortunately by an anonymous attendee, but that's fine. Let me read the question to the panel. As the business is a part of the essential service during the MCO, what is your view on the abscondment during the MCO due to staff basically not returning to work and no communication made for more than 3 days? In other words, somebody probably, when the MCO was announced, quickly went balik kampung. And even though the company received approval to continue operations, this person didn't want to or couldn't get back to the operations. I'm sure, Sharon, you've had some examples of that as well.
Yeah, so, well, no, actually, this time they're all pretty good.
This time.
They're all pretty good this time around. I think, as you said, it's that whole collective journey. We're all in it together. But I would defer this question to Selva. Actually, I think this would be contractually they are supposed to come back to work, right? And if for 24 hours or 48 hours, then we can do something about it. Yeah.
So I would say, Sharon, you're lucky. I'm glad that you have such a great workforce. From the experiences that my clients have had, yes, I have to say the majority of the employees understand that this is just not the time to be nonsensical. But there are clients who've had this odd cases where the employees have just not turned up at work. I mean, even if it is work from home, right? And they are non-contactable. And there's been a range of excuses. There were 2 cases that were genuine, because the employee had gone back just before MCO was imposed to the East Coast and could not travel back. So that was fine. And one employee was in a very remote area where internet connection was very bad. So he was just not able to log in when they wanted him to log in, and it was very difficult. But there were cases where employees took advantage of it. And I would just say, treat it like any other case. They don't report for work even if it is online, and they they don't keep you informed, just treat it as absence without leave.
Thank you for that. Jaya, would you have anything to add to any of the questions that you've heard just now and the answers of your fellow panelists?
No, I think they were very well covered.
Okay, you're waiting for your turn to launch your publications, right? All right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we also answered a few questions in writing. Thank you, especially Sharon, for that. So please check the Q&A if your question has not been answered live, if it has been a written answer. So I think, yeah, with this, it's time to end the session. Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have another round of virtual applause for our speakers, Jaya, Selva, and Sharon? Thank you so much, all of you. And yeah, MDBC will of course continue to deliver value to you during this RMCO period, which is going to be a long time again. This week we will have another important session of our MDBC Human Resources Forum on employment matters, discussing necessary matters such as employment-related cost-cutting measures, leading to retrenchment exercises, inclusive of any legal requirements, post-retrenchment, which action should HR take to support employees who stay and get the business quickly back to high productivity and morale levels. So quite an important topic. So do tune in on Thursday, same time, same place for these insights. Closing off, we would like to have our own poll on this webinar as well as on MDBC at this moment. 3 quick questions. How would you rate this webinar? The content. Question 2 on the technical setup and the flow. And if you scroll down, please give MDBC a report card for how we operated and how we provided service to you during this whole MCO period. Of course, 10 is the highest figure. Please take note of that. Thank you. All right. We'll give you a few seconds to answer these questions while I continue talking. You also see a slide here of our Move with MDBC. It's an app that supports you with continuing to moving just 5 kilometers. Of course, the gyms are not open yet. The pools are not open yet. Some of us can walk already, run, cycle a bit. It's not a competition, but to support you to continue moving while the gyms are still closed. You can do this in your own time at a venue of your choice and even spread it over multiple days. So scan the QR code and go to the MDBC Move with MDBC app to join. It's fun. We'll get some, you can put in your results, you can post your selfie, and we can post it on Facebook. All right, we're going to close the poll at this moment. Yeah, okay, thank you. We can close it. And of course, at the same time, we would like to thank our premium partners for the strong support. We still welcome more advertisers, more sponsors and partners. So please contact us. And yeah, enjoy this last CMCO day. Tomorrow we'll start the RMCO. I would like to say goodbye to Sharon and Selva. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights with us. Do join the Skrine survey, of course. And with that message, we would now like to move to the last part, just the last 1 minute of the session, which is the launch of the Randstad publication. Jaya, back to you, please, for a moment. Go ahead.
As I mentioned earlier on, this was a publication we put together as an alliance, and this will be made available on our own website as well, but will be shared with MDBC members later, both from a white paper as well as protocol frameworks that you can reference. Thank you, Marco.
All right, that was quick and easy, as it should be. It's approaching 5 o'clock. Again, we will follow up with a thank you note, post-read with links to all the presentations of the speakers today. Thank you to Randstad today for the initiatives, and again, thank you to Skrine and Dutch Lady Milk to also join us. Ladies and gentlemen, see you back at RMCO in a few days with the MDBC Human Resources Forum on employment matters. If you haven't registered yet, please do so now immediately. Go to our website and register online. Thank you so much, and bye from the MDBC team. All right, bye-bye.
Thanks, Marco. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.